So, Mr. Andy Timmons, always a pleasure to chat with you, but in particular a pleasure when you've got incredible new music out, which, by the way, is every record. I mean, a great excuse
come on.
to do an interview with Andy Timmons is to go through the back catalogue again, have an excuse to do it. But let's just start right off the bat with Recovery, because this is an emotional roller coaster, Andy.
Well, thank you, man. Yeah, I really do still consider making albums. Of course, each song starts off as its own entity, but I do like to put together records that kind of make sense together. And a lot of this material is very personal, as most of my tunes start off to be either just reflecting on what's going on in my life or in the world or whatever. And sometimes songs are just songs, and you got in the instrumental world you come up with a name that might be evocative to the mood of the song. But there is a lot of pieces on here that are very, very personal. When you think about, well, Elegy for Jeff is quite obvious as a tribute to our hero that we lost a couple of years ago, Mr. Jeff Beck. But things like Recovery and Why Must It Be So, Where Did You Go, Arizona Sunset, they all have their own deep meaning for myself. But what I love about instrumental music is that I find that, once I've released a tune, it might have a very personal meaning for me on whatever emotional level, but then the listener can kind of take from it what they need. It can mean anything to the person on the receiving end. And so that's the gratifying thing when I hear about certain pieces of music that may mean something to somebody depending on when they heard it in their life or what they were going through. And if that helps them in any small way, then that's my mark of success in a lot of ways, because that's what music has always been for me, as far as just being this, place to be okay and away from whatever distractions and difficulties there are in life.
No, absolutely, no, for sure. And I mean, look, it's the $1 million question right from the off, but you're one of the best out there in terms of just expressing yourself emotionally on the instrument.
Thank you.
What if you're crafting a melody? I mean, we'll go through some specifics on the album in just a little bit, but fundamentally expressing yourself, where do you think that really comes from? What's the key to expressing yourself the way you feel it?
$1 million question, and short and long answers available. And I wish I had a specific pathway, like here's the obvious way that this happens, but I can only speak to just kind of looking backward and, how did I get here? How and to be clear, I think I'm scratching the surface with what I'd like to be able to express. If somebody says that I'm good at expressing, I take that to heart, and I know I'm making slight improvements along the way, but I think there's just, eons to go. Let me start there as the baseline. But it's really, from a very young age, I did find music as an outlet for me, because I was a very shy, individual. Music was kind of my outlet in that way. And once I began playing guitar, it was definitely my solace, and that's, the safe place to be. And then it's just really pursuit of just trying to get better to where the instrument is not an obstacle, but just a delivery device, so there's no middleman, so to speak. Ideally, with when you're just trying to make music, people ask me if I'm recording or if I'm performing, what's going on in your mind? And in the best case scenario, that's nothing. And that's an odd thing to say, because it's that alludes to almost a meditative state where you're trying to let go of everything else. I'm not good at meditating, but music can be that for me. But it's very difficult to bat 1,000 like that. It's not, there's always distractions, and our mind is usually the biggest obstacle we have. Thoughts of inferiority, thoughts of insecurity, things not right with your tone, or man, the kick drum and the bass aren't locked the way you'd like it to be, or whatever. All these things that can be distracted. But when things are right and you're not being distracted by all that, then things can really connect on a pretty deep level, if everybody's antenna are up in a similar way.
Of course, and of course everybody's got a different way, of course, of getting out of their own way. I mean, it's one of those ones, you could be sitting in the bedroom playing. I'm not talking about at your level, I'm talking about everyone else, like myself and the guys that will be watching. And you might do something great. As soon as that red light comes on or someone else comes in the room, it's like everything tenses up.
That thing that you're talking about never goes away. The best playing I'll ever do is when I'm just sitting by myself. That's because there's a certain type of relaxed uninhibited thing that can happen. Even when during the pandemic, I did a lot of online concerts where, I would just be broadcasting from this space. I would do concerts from my studio, and I'd sound check and things are loose and I'm feeling good. And even though I'm just turning on a camera and I don't see anybody, but now you're performing and it's a different thing. And it's always a struggle to just remain loose, to breathe properly. That's the thing for me that I'm, getting better at, is just trying to breathe. And sometimes you get so caught up in the activity and the emotion and whatever the music is demanding of you. Yeah, it can be, I can forget to breathe, and that's so breathing's important, obviously. But yeah, so, but it's an ongoing struggle, to get out of your own way, to let things just happen. But so much of that, the question was touching on earlier, Jonathan, was that, how do you get to that point where you're expressing better? And there's just nothing that replaces the continual act of effort and just the trying. I just did a couple of weeks in Italy on tour. Then I got home, and you get busy catching up on life stuff. And I traveled to New York for some sessions. So it got me out of my normal practice mode. And so I made a point earlier today to just sit down for an hour. Felt pretty rusty for the first 5 or 10 minutes, but then things start connecting a bit. But I do know, and I'm a firm, staunch believer in it. Just every day, if you could just do it first thing, and really develop that relationship and that habit of, becoming one with the instrument, be it just, even if it's just playing scales or playing tunes. I generally like to improvise. That's my form of practice. Today I was working on some diminished type ideas that I'm not really fluent with. So I made that kind of I did a camp recently, and John Schofield was one of the other guitarists. And I think there was an app he recommended to me called Drum Genius. It just has all these cool, like real drummer loops,
Yeah.
So I opened that today and found this cool James Brown funky thing, and off I went on, half whole diminished for an hour,
So specifically the fact that you're talking about what you were going through today and what have you, and sure. I guess it changes from day to day. But,
absolutely.
What is something that, like, right now sort of would just sort of lock you into that mode where you feel like you've just regained that connection to the instrument after putting it down for a day?
Hard for me to kind of verbalize what it is. Sometimes it's just the way time feels. Some of it's a physicality, just kind of get your muscles going. Can you hear that? Okay, I didn't really spend time.
Oh, absolutely. Cut it and put it out on an album, Andy. It's ready to go.
But I usually practice with a pure, clean tone. In fact, I was practicing with those Waza Air headphones I just got. So I just get like a pure, clean, no amp kind of tone. I don't want any interference between finger and string and what I'm hearing. But now I'm running through my Marshall and my Suhr right now. Very low volume.
But every note that you play, Andy, you're always thinking of a rhythm, aren't you?
Yeah, I think, that was running through my mind earlier today as I think about teaching and things that are so important. And time is such one of obviously the most primal, foundational things that we all really need to have a command of. And the players that I found myself gravitating towards through my life, I started to realize it's because of their time. And when a musician's time is so ingrained, then they can really very specifically place the note. It's not just a matter, is it close to being an eighth or a dotted eighth or a 16th, but really like a very intentional place. You know what I mean? It's like, but it was something that, and I was recognizing when I had this thought earlier that I was just sitting, but there was a groove going on in my head, and there was a part of my body moving to it, and I wasn't even aware of it. Then I became a conscious thing, but that's been going on since I was a little kid. So even without the instrument in my hands, I was on the regular participating in some kind of groove, especially now if there's music on anywhere in my peripheral. I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to be subdividing. I'm going to be thinking about it. I'll probably be tapping something. Sometimes I click my teeth in time. That's when my jaw muscles are a little well developed. People think I look like a chipmunk sometimes, but that's literally because that's a lifetime of kind of clenching a certain way. It's probably not healthy for me.
You've got to feel that somewhere in your body. Yeah.
I think so. There's some people that say, well, you shouldn't move when you practice. It should all be internalized. But what works for me is feeling it. If I'm at a show, this is happening. I've got a groove.
But Andy, you never move. You never move on stage.
I flail. It's funny because, good Lord, thank God I can't see myself when I'm playing, because it would be just. I don't. Hey, things do move. But there you go. It's however you can. And there's a thing I do with my legs that I know Mike Stern does the same thing, and I might have witnessed him do it. And if that's the influence, but then I saw an old video of Terry Kath from Chicago, who I know that Mike Stern was a fan of, and there was Terry Kath doing the same thing. It just feels good to feel time through your body, and but like I was saying, so even if you're not playing music, at the moment, but you can always be participating in some kind of groove. And so when you get on your instrument, it's just that much further fortified. So it's just something that's more natural, and you're feeling it. And I'll improvise lines in my head if there's music going on, and that works. The same thing works for melody, because people talk a lot about melody. And so I'm always kind of participating both rhythmically and melodically in life, which is kind of part of my nature that's developed over time from my love of music, just because from the cradle, I was told that I was always up in the crib dancing, and trying to groove with the Beatles or whatever was on the record player that my brothers had. But my story is not unique. It's just, I've really pursued it, I guess, maybe,
it's worked, that's for sure. And talking about melody and talking about recovery, where did you go? It's just standing out right now on my first few listens as one of the my favorites on the record. And
thank you, man.
Absolutely beautiful melodies that are going on and there. Yeah. Just talking specifically on that track. I mean, again, it's another one of those ones. I'm sure you're just sort of pulling them from the ether at this point. But crafting a melody like that, talk us through it.
I wish I could tell you. There's something that I refer to as the Auralect that when I did a course for True Fire called Melodic Muse, they asked me to do a course on melody. And so exactly what you're asking me, I'm trying to formulate, how do I teach this, or how do I explain, where some of these things come from? Because sometimes it is, like you say, from the ether but what that is, I believe, is that we've just taken in so much beauty, and especially if we're paying attention, as some of us do, to really great melody and great songs, that those things tend to stick with us. And I believe a library develops of, just like what we do with our guitar heroes, what we think is a great soloist or somebody with a great tone, those things gather in our head. So when we're playing, we're trying to rise to that, that type of thing, where everybody goes for Stevie Ray's tone or Eric Johnson's tone or Hendrix's tone, whoever it may be. And maybe we don't get close to that, but it's that thing in our head that we're hearing that. It's the same with music and melody. I think that of all the music I've taken in, which I've obviously just been a big pop guy my whole life with the Beatles and all that kind of stuff, and then resonating with classical and jazz and the voice leading that jazz encourages and necessitates, really. That all kind of informs where, whatever song I'm, so that. The melody, that's the chorus of Where Did You Go? And that's a very simple, because it's just, it's a pop tune. Even though the chords are very simple and in the key, they're emotional in a way. And it's the way that I'm phrasing it in the pretty emphatic way I'm playing it. On the F chord, that's just that third. Do the same thing on the C chord. I go to the third of the A minor. said it so many times in instances like this where if a chord is happening, whether I'm improvising or whether I'm composing, there's a really good chance the third of that harmony of that chord in that moment is going to be featured in a way. And that's a prime example. I resolved to the E minor on the fifth. I couldn't help myself. I get down to the G. And then I end up on that B flat major with a D, you know. It's kind of a nice move to go from a B flat major Lydian to E minor, back to that verse, you know.
At this stage though, Andy, is it more just what you're, well, I'm assuming it's been that way for a long time, but it's more what you're hearing rather than actually necessarily targeting something from your theory?
That's a great point, because I'm analyzing it for you now, but when I was doing it, it was just about, that's just what I want to hear. And I alluded a minute ago about how my study and love of jazz, I think, led me to being much more aware of that whole thing. I could have related this whole melody to the key of C major ish, you know. It's kind of all in that same, you got F major, C major, A minor, E minor. It's all kind of from that. And so I could have come up with a melody thinking about, you know, oh well, you know, what am I doing? Think some C major. Some of it may sound nice, but again, you know, I have such an awareness of as a chord is happening, if the melody that I'm considering is a chord tone or not a chord tone, that's the whole thing there. Is it a tension note, or is it somewhat of a release? So it's all tension and release. So it's such basic stuff. So
one of the things you do so well, of course, as well, is the you know, the colouring of every note. And something that's kind of interesting these days is in modern music, there's so much auto-tuning and tweaking and production tricks and what have you, that a lot of the time can suck an awful lot of the human element out of it. Now, your pitch, of course, is impeccable, but that doesn't mean that it's always...
Oh, definitely not.
To look on a tuner, because you know, like if you were to go back like to Hendrix as well, you know, there's so much of it where it's like, and on the face of it, it might be actually wrong, but it's so right, if you get what I'm saying.
No, for sure. They look at the, you know, I remember very famously, I had an instructor when I was at the University of Miami, and the Beat It solo for Michael Jackson, you know, Eddie Van Halen, was at the forefront. Everybody's marveling. He's like, there's so many wrong notes, I can't believe, you know. I'm like, what's a wrong note? You know, it sounds pretty great to the entire world, you know. But, you know, so, yeah, pitch is very important to me, and I'm very sensitive to tuning. But once you know, machinate that, once you let a machine take over and just tune everything, boy, it gets really sterile, you know. But I'll very specifically choose sometimes to be, you know, not just slight, you know. A little sharp. Yeah, there's so many places in between each note that can really be evocative. But yeah, I mean, you don't want that, you know, out of tune, nervous, vibrato-y thing that a lot of us are guilty of it at times. Steve Vai had said to me last time I saw him, he complimented that he thought I was really in tune, and that meant a lot to me. But that made me even more insecure than every time I started listening to myself play. I was like, oh, no, everything's out of tune, you know. I got to be better, you know. But it could be, the guitar is an imperfect instrument. We all know this. There's all kinds of tuning things that are supposed to improve, and they may solve certain issues. But the basic thing is, it's all in your fingers and it's all in your ears. You learn how to properly intonate, of course, and the guitar has to be well strobed. But then it's a matter of, you know, finger pressure and having the ear to recognize. And there's a lot of things that I've developed over time, and I know players like Tommy Emmanuel and all these really great upper echelon players that really are in tune. There's a lot of compensation going on within chords and within notes. And even Jeff Beck, who, if you were to take his guitar and strum it without him holding it at the time, it would probably sometimes wildly out of tune, but he just knew how to fight it and to get it to the pitch that he needed. And it was brilliant at that. But that's the connection of a great ear and knowing those limitations and compensations that have to be made with even sometimes within chords. Like there's a piece that I play called The Prayer and the Answer. Now I'm greatly sharpening the third of that chord right now. There I'm not doing it. Because even though the guitar will say that it's in tune, well, it's not in tune. Sorry about that. But even so, my fingers got it there. I know that there's going to be some inconsistencies with certain intervals within chord. That's not bad. If I don't sharpen it, ever so subtle. But it gets down to the micro level. But those are the things that even if the listener isn't quite aware what's happening, if those things aren't right, or if they're generic-y in a way, the music doesn't quite have the impact. And it's something that I've been real sensitive to because of the great players, that I love so much. Metheny and Carlton, their pitch and their delivery system are so great. And Jeff Beck, of course, being another great proponent. Eric Johnson, I find very in tune.
Because we've talked a little bit off camera about like some technical stuff, or technical issues. You played so many shows over the years, and between Danger and all your solo stuff, and the G3s and everything. What has been the biggest technical issue you've had to overcome on a show?
Oh wow! Well, it was a Danger show. Well, there's many, but one of the first ones that come to mind, we did 2 tours opening for Kiss back in Danger. We did some dates on the Hot in the Shade tour in the U.S. And then we did all the UK dates on the Revenge tour. So this would have been 1999. And our show in London was at the Wembley Arena, the smaller Wembley. But still for us, we're playing Wembley. This is great. And we're opening for Kiss, and I get out on stage, and my guitar's just completely dead. Like the wireless, I have no guitar for an entire song. And my guitar tech that had been with me for several years had just taken another gig because we only had a handful of gigs left. And our road manager was my roadie, and he didn't know what to do. And I was like, this, talk about putts in your hand. I was like, oh man, we got it sorted out. But I mean, then sometimes the rig will go dead, or there's always something. But I mean, the best thing you can do is just remain calm, and just there's going to be an answer somehow, And usually, I can't think of a time where I ever gave up and okay, there's no way to get past this. So it's always worked out somehow through illness, through tech issues, whatever it might be.
But you know why that is though? It's because you're a born improviser.
Well, there's something to that, and just experience of from the age of 13, I've always been gigging. There was a Danger promo that we were doing, but it was just Ted and I, doing an acoustic, unplugged kind of thing. But the power went out. Of course, you don't have a PA at that point. So I just took my acoustic guitar and strolled through the crowd, and we figured out a way to make stuff work, whatever it might be. But there is that thing of like, okay, come on, kids, we got to get the show going here. What do we got to do? And I'm not the best with tech or gear, but I've gotten better at it over the years. But usually there's smart people around me. Hopefully,
absolutely.
Hopefully so. But you just do the best you can.
And just sticking on the live theme, because obviously you're just going to be leaving for some shows in just a few days. I'm sure a lot of these songs from Recovery are going to get played out live. Have you had a chance to play them in front of an audience yet?
We did. So the thing about these tours that I'm doing right now with the Andy Timmons band, but the record really isn't an Andy Timmons band record. It's another record that Josh Smith has produced with me. So we're using kind of his stable of guys. So it's a bit more keyboard based than my usual power trio stuff. But we've been doing like Arizona Sunset, and we do Elegy for Jeff, and we do Recovery. And I've done a handful of shows here locally where we've played with another lineup, and the tunes have been going over great. I mean, the response to the record has been very humblingly very strong. You never know when you put something out. You're just kind of doing it because you love it. I've been realizing that the overall art and what an artist does, if it's real, it's really selfish. It's not a calculated, here's what I think I should be doing, here's what I think, might be the best for whatever success. You're just making the music that you're driven to do, and that really means something to you. And then, of course, once you put it out there, you hope that, it might, resonate with other people in whatever way that they might resonate with it. But you never know. But it for me, it's just kind of an authenticity thing. I can kind of sense when people, I think, are just over trying to do something or whatever it might be. It's just the real art, I think, is when it's just really selfish at first, and just what that artist is driven to do. And there's some artists that I love, like a guy like Todd Rundgren, who I'm a huge fan of, and he makes a lot of records and he goes a lot of different paths. And I don't love all of his records, but I love that he does them, because I just know that he's driven to do it, and if that's what he wants to do, then that's what it should be, regardless of what his fan base, may prefer. It's just like, well, I just gotta be me, So you've seen me kind of dabble in other things along the way, and some fans are cool with it, and some fans maybe don't dig it or whatever, don't resonate with it. But it's okay, But I had to do what I had to do in the moment. So.
And it's a snapshot of that time in your life as well, and it is for the fans. That's the truth of that as well. When you hear a lot of your tracks over the years, it takes you back to first time hearing it live or first hearing it record.
No, for sure, no. And I again, if I'm part of that for other people's lives and stuff, as music has been for me, that's success. That's a real honor. So I just, like everything, I just want to keep getting better. I want to just keep doing what I do. I love practicing. I love the attempt. I may never do half the things I would love to be able to do, but that's okay. As long as I'm honoring that, whatever gift I have, if I'm just trying to get better every day, then that's my happy place, So that's a good lesson for everybody. You just got to keep working on it. We never get there. We're never like, all right, boy, that was great. I finally did it. You might be proud of certain things along the way, and that's certainly the case with me. I can look at something and go, okay, I'm really happy, But now what? We got stuff to do here,
Absolutely. And look, the tones are always incredible on your albums, and they've changed so much over the years, depending on your rig and what have you. Recovery's exactly the same. Talk us through what you're using on this album. Yeah,
so it's a combination of what you see behind me. You see two Lone Stars just behind me. So that's usually a foundational thing, and maybe half the album might be that, but usually clean platform with my pedal board. And then over my other shoulder, you see the Sur SL68. Right above that you don't see is a Marshall actual 68 plexi. So those are running right now, just clean, pretty clean. Here's, let's see here. So here's just the amp. So this kind of low volume, clean. Then I'll hit that with a variety of different kind of gains. So my neck pickup, slight gain, but cleaner. That's the Keeley Mark III driver. So we spent a long time working on that particular drive. The Keeley Halo dual echo is always on. Stereo. Right now it's on the Halo setting, which is my dotted eighth quarter with modulation. That kind of vibe. I've got an expression pedal on it, so I can have a complete dry or all the way to way too wet. But for then like a high gain lead sound, I've got the JHS. So there's no gain pedal. So quite a bit of harmonic content. And again, that's everything into the front of the amps. There's no effects loops on the old type of Marshall circuit. So the beauty of the Halo is it works really great either in front of the amp or in the effects loop. So those are the kind of the main things. And every now and then, so one of the caveats with a lead guitar tone that I'll dial in on my bridge. once I get that to a happy place where it's nice, enough gain without being buzzy and not too bright, if I go to the neck pickup, it's always going to be too tubby. So then what I do is I have another Mark III Keeley driver on the germanium setting. I'll put that in front of the JHS, which is my lead tone, and that kind of carves out a little bit of the low end. So when you hear me do... So that's the Keeley Mark III driver hitting the front end with just a bit of gain, a bit of top on the germanium setting to kind of it's just boosting but really kind of thinning out the low end so I can get a good balance between here's the bridge again. If I don't switch, it's not bad, but
I'm just sitting enjoying it, to be honest, Andy. I mean, so much of it as well is the character in that signature Ibanez of yours. I mean, how's that holding up all these years?
Just got refretted. We think it's the 9th time. But this is guitar. So I've been playing this guitar half my life. It's 31 years old. I'm 61 years old now. So it was built on February 14th, 1994. So Recovery was released on its birthday, February 14th of 2025. So yeah, on his 31st birthday. But yeah, it's holding up great. And I just did 11 shows in Italy, and it played better than ever. I've got the new guy here. So this one though, it's as that one's an old Stratty alder body. This is the mahogany. So you'll notice it's louder. So I've been using this when I do songs from Resolution.
What was that track recorded on, though?
That was that track was recorded on the AT300. So it's essentially,
okay.
And that guitar is a mahogany guitar, same neck with inlays, the rosewood board. But that guitar, the original AT300 was the antique violin finish, and it had these same pickups, the DiMarzio AT1 and the Cruiser, but they were mounted directly into the body. This one, they're in the pick guard, so it's kind of in between the old AT100 and the AT300. I love it. It's really been, I've been using this on tour as well. So this gets out for several songs. I stick to my old, my old blankie, my security blanket, my whoopee as they call it. But this guitar's been doing great as well.
What's the toughest song for you in the sets these days, Andy? Because you've got some moments that are just so otherworldly, and we wait for them on the live shows, and you always pull them off. Always a little bit different every time. But is there any that you sort of like? You listen back and you think, oh God, why did I record it like that? How am I gonna cut this again?
Oh, that's a good question. Nothing really comes to. I mean, boy, that's a great question. It's usually more of the songs that maybe aren't committed to tape yet that we're playing live that I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to do. And there's a song that's going to be on the next Andy Timmons band record that's called Day Begins, and it's got some tricky bits in it that I've got that I know I want to. Okay, I want to capture that. Some nights it happens, some nights it doesn't. We haven't been playing this song. There's a tune called "Beautiful Strange" off that was in This Is Now, but it's this one lick I recorded. It's like I get it every other night, but how do I do it? What is it? See, I can't even do it on the spot. But that's it. It's one of those trying to sound like the mini Moog, Jeff Beck, Jan Hammer thing. Anyway, I'll practice and come back next time.
Just touching on a little bit with Beck, because you know, you've got this incredible tribute to him on the record. I know you were a lifelong fan. I don't think there's been anybody who's evolved more with the instrument than Beck. Could you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because, you know, I was very fortunate to be, you know, I've had his music in my life since, but when it was coming out in real time. So I had an older brother that's 12 years older than myself, my brother Mark. So he was 12 in 1963 when I was born. So he was buying all the British Invasion records in real time. So all the Beatles, all the Dave Clark Five. But then he also became a fan of the Yardbirds. So I remember vividly having the Yardbirds' greatest hits in the household, which might have come out in 67, 68. Even though the song that I'm going to reference, Shapes of Things, was recorded in 1965. But from the age of 4 and 5 years old, I was already, you know, aware of there's this great pop tune, but it had this fuzzed out, feedback laden guitar solo. You know, that was Jeff on his, probably that broadcaster. I think he had the telly-shaped, you know, single coil pickup guitar, and fuzzed out and feedback. They recorded that at Chess Studios in America. And so I've always said that could have been, that's all he had done, he still would have been, you know, one of the upper echelon, you know, great guitar players of all time, because he was doing these things pre-Hendrix. You know, he was really an advanced, you know, ahead of his time player. But then, so he goes from that, the Yardbirds, or he leaves the Yardbirds and forms the Jeff Beck group, which is pretty much the template of the Led Zeppelin type thing, you know, where he had Rod Stewart on vocals and Ron Wood on bass and Mickey Waller on drums. Incredible power trio with one of the greatest rock singers of all time. And it's just great material, kind of reinventing what was happening, you know, as Cream was happening, as Hendrix was happening. But very much his own thing. But then in the 70s, evolving into the Mahavishnu influenced kind of fusiony stuff, you know, and getting into things with Jan Hammer, doing those pitch bendy things that I was just talking about, or attempting to do, and then getting into the Guitar Shop record where he did Where Were You? And then that was certainly a seismic shift in, you know, what was possible with a whammy bar and melody and just but just kept going, all the techno stuff he did with Jennifer Batten later on. And then, of course, for me, I think the pinnacle is the Emotion and Commotion record, where there's great rock tunes, and he's still, you know, playing his butt off like that. But it was Nessun Dorma and Corpus Christi Carol and Over the Rainbow and some of those real pretty melodies that only he could touch on like that, you know. So that is kind of the trajectory. When you look at, you know, his contemporaries from the Yardbirds, you know, Clapton and Page, amazing. And again, two of the biggest, you know, guitar heroes of all time. Whether they kept advancing or not is another story. You know, they had what they do and still do great, you know, to this day. But Jeff refused to repeat. He refused to rest on his laurels. He wanted to keep evolving. And that's what I'd like to aspire to do. You know, I just want to keep getting better. So for whatever reason, he's a kindred spirit in that way. Even though I was, you know, I loved his playing throughout all those years. But it wasn't until I saw him in the late '90s, and then I kept really starting to go back, because he originally wasn't one of my biggest influences. I liked those records, but you know, he's pretty raw, a little rough and ready is one of the records is called. And I was getting into the guys that are a bit more polished, like the Lukethers and the Robin Ford and Carlton and Mike Stern even. But yeah, the more that I started recognizing what was happening, how he was evolving, then it really just became, you know, one of those obsessions.
Did you ever get to play with him, Andy?
No, we never played. I did. I'm a stalker, so I did get to meet him several times. You know, I would somehow manage to get backstage at a show here and there. The first time I saw him in '99, Jennifer Batten was playing with him. You know, playing guitar synth behind him and guitar, and so I knew her. She was an Ibanez endorsee originally before she went on and did other things, and managed to meet him that night. And he signed my Wired album and. So I was around him maybe 4 or 5 times like that, but there was never any. I don't think he was aware of my playing that I know of. But that, you know, it wasn't about me. I was always happy just to tell him what he meant to me, you know. And he was always very humble, very, very sweet, gracious guy, you know. So again, that's all I could hope for, just to tell him thank you, and and I will continue to. But that's why I really was I just seemed like the right thing to open the record with a nod of the hat to him, and play just a little, not trying to play like him, but just have a little bit of that. So I wrote it as a solo piece, just like this. But I had the idea of like, oh, I wonder what, keyboards along with it might sound like. But I sent it to the great friend of mine named Jeff Babco, who I'd worked with for a long time in Simon Phillips's group. Has a great knowledge of all things 70s and all things music in general. But so I sent it to him and thought, he might hear what I'm hearing on like kind of a Max Middleton kind of Rhodesy thing. And he just, even though my performance of it was a cappella, there was no click, he played perfectly along with me. And so the voicings and everything you hear on the record were done after I played the lead guitar. We didn't play together. But I'm really, really happy with what he did. It's got a nice vibe, and I thought it was a nice way to set up the record. And the next track, Recovery, also is actually, again, a bit of a influence by Jeff. There's a song called Hammerhead on the Emotion and Commotion record, which is very much a Jan Hammer. It's real heavy. I just love the groove of it. So it's a little more up tempo. And the thing about, and this is something I can say unobjectively because somebody pointed it out to me, but I can recognize it as being accurate. And somebody who I was doing an interview with last week was talking about the emotion of the record, of Recovery, and how that every song has got a lot of different things to it. There's a lot of, there can be some darkness and some sadness, but there's always optimism. And I started thinking about the compositions and the arc of what happens, and that was really accurate. And I didn't even realize what I was doing for myself, because it was, a lot of these songs would have been, written in the last 4 or 5 years, pandemic included, and in the world stage as we see it today. There's clearly a lot to be, struck by, let's just say. So, but again, refusing, love is greater than hate, refusing to give up on, empathy and decency and respect and kindness, So the record is really imbued with the sadness of what we're reacting to, but also the optimism of, we'll get through this and we're gonna be okay.
Again, it's another one of these tricky ones because you know what you know, and you can't delete that information. But if you were starting again on the guitar and you wanted to get to where you are quicker, is there some different ways that you would have approached it, or would you just do it all exactly the same?
Well, the thing I do know, the cool thing is that now it's the blessing and the curse. We have the world in our back pocket at all times. We have all this information. It can be completely overwhelming, and is for a lot of people. I've run into students and people like, I need to know every mode and every. No, you don't. So the thing is, and the beauty of how I learned initially was that it was just all by ear, and it was because I loved it. So the thing to not lose sight of is, we can create, and we can study lots of exercises, and there's fretboard knowledge is definitely a wonderful thing. But to do it in increments to where you're not completely overwhelmed, I think the most important thing is to be making music at all points along the way. And that's what I've always done as far as when I'm working on something, I'll work on it a bit, but there becomes immediate application and attempts to bring it into whatever my knowledge and vocabulary might be. So, boy, I wish I had it like this Andy Timmons quick 15-minute fix answer for that question. But if you love it enough, you'll keep doing it. Learn songs, have fun playing songs. But also, it's good to balance it with some of the busy work. And I didn't do that 2 years later, but when I was 16, I started taking lessons, learning how to read. Eventually learned a bit about modes and stuff like that. What I loved about the modes was not so much that I wanted to think everything as a mode, but it did teach me the notes on the fretboard. So learning scales, of course, it can be very helpful, but then get away from them, use them as guideposts. Here's notes that are available But now let's not think of them as patterns. Let's think of them as just as melodies and ways of making music.
And was there a sort of lightning bolt moment in terms of fret visualization that you thought, actually, all of a sudden, this has really opened the door for me, or was it just chipping away?
Well, these are things that a lot of things that happen so natural, but as I teach in my more mature years, thinking back and realizing some things that I'm not even aware of. But there was, certainly when you've got the pentatonic scales in different positions, I was definitely doing a lot of visualizing with whatever chord shapes. I'll be thinking of all the different chord shapes, even subconsciously. So that's a valuable thing, is to be able to map out, not only whatever positions of your scales, but what chords they relate to. And within those chords, there's the information that I talk about. It's nice to know where the chord tones are. If it was that third, it was that C, the C of the A minor. But even just to know where the root is of all the harmony that you're playing. Where's all the A's, That's the frustrating thing. There can be multiple ways of playing that same note on the guitar. But having that home note, everything just kind of can be drawn around that. If you think of the minor pentatonic, I do a lot of things horizontally. So that is one kind of epiphanal thing that was valuable for me, is just to realize that everything did not have to be straight up and down. So as a kid, I would have had this position and this position, but then finding ways to connect. Next thing you know, you're not in a particular position, but you can just kind of drift over the entire guitar neck.
One final thing before I let you go, Andy. Last time I saw you, we were just at that PRS 40th anniversary show, and that ended up being an incredible night of music with John Mayer headlining. God. But fantastic performance from everybody involved. But what was some of your takeaways from the evening? You must have enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it a lot. So Mark Lettieri is a good friend of mine, so I was really pleased to see him be featured with his band. He's been a PRS guy now for a few years. So great to hear him play so greatly. Now, I had never seen John Mayer play, and so I will say that I was really impressed. I mean, that I don't mean that in some kind of, gosh, what a surprise, because obviously he's a very respected player and singer and songwriter, and I've been aware of his music. But boy, I was deeply impressed. I thought his tone was one of the best of the night, and he just played really beautifully. I was really impressed with him. It was great seeing Howard Leese, selfishly, because I'm a big Hart fan, so it was great to see him. Great to see Philip Sayce, who I think is one of the greatest blues rock Hendrixy players out there. So I've known Paul for many years, not quite 40, but not much less than 40. One of his first dealers was one of my dear friends here, who actually now owns the Guitar Sanctuary. It was a great shop here in McKinney. He had a shop called Sound Southwest with Jimmy Wallace in Dallas when Paul started out, and they were one of the first dealers. So I've kind of known Paul since those days. And he's just one of my favorite human beings out there, because here's another guy that's just completely driven by the art of it and the love of it. He's very similar to Jeff Beck, but throughout all that, he can play. He's always got a cool band. So I've witnessed him play many times over the years. So that part wasn't a surprise. I was just happy for him to get to that 40-year mark and to still be going at such a great level. You know what I mean? And just still making a difference for a lot of people. Great human being, and I'm proud to call him a friend.
When are we going to see you playing live again in the UK, Andy?
Oh, so I'm hoping later this year. There was mumblings about doing some more stuff with the Pedal Show guys. I'm not sure yet if that's going to happen or not, but that's the last time I played over there. It was just a handful of gigs with Dan and Mick. We played the Cavern, which was a treat for me, being the uber Beatle fan. So as soon as possible, I would love to come and do some more shows with my band. So hopefully later this year, if not early next year.
Awesome. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking the time. I could go another hour talking Beatles and Ear Ecstasy and Ear Ecstasy too. And all.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again, man.
Nice one. Well, look, congratulations on the new record, Andy, and we'll see you when you're back in the UK.
That sounds great, man. Thank you. Peace. Cheers, guys.